Cool. So welcome everybody. This is the GTKR Diver webinar via Zoom on June 27th, 2023. And my name is Keith Rutzart. I'm a multi-faceted person here. I am a conservationist and a dive master since 2014. I'm regularly on the Beach Hopper 2 as crew, pushing people into the water in various places and making them sing songs. And I'm also a general contractor, so I'm do different things in the field, a lot of piping and stuff, and I have like different perspective on things than perhaps a biologist would be, because to me this is like an underwater landscaping project, and this is like construction management. So today's agenda, we'll have to talk about the background and the legal authority, how we can do this. Talk about the Tankers Reef project, the kelp restoration specialty diver certification and what that entails. And we're going to have an update on project status. This will be key for those people who are already kelp restoration certified. They can learn about the newest parts of the project and its current status. And then the proposed expansion we have for later in the summer or whenever the Department of Fish and Wildlife decides to grant us a permit. So I'm not going to give you the whole backstory, but just to say things in brief, there were beautiful kelp forests in Monterey and all around. And then due to marine heat waves and multiple stressors, sea star die-off, and so on, we have urchin barrens now. And these urchin barrens are all around the Monterey Peninsula, and they are in all of the marine protected areas, state marine conservation areas, and the state marine reserves. So here's one of Mary's pictures. So in the Monterey Peninsula, you can see in this overall picture from the Kelp Watch that this gray area is where kelp usually is prior to the heat wave, and these little dots here are where the kelp is configured now. These are very big pixels in this scenario, but if you look at it and turn it around, this is Point Lobos, here's Whalers Cove, and you can see here South Monastery is showing some kelp out here, and there's some kelp around here, but very little compared to what it was. And I like to say about the satellite data is it's 570 miles above the Earth is where they took the picture, right? And each pixel is 100 feet by 100 feet. So if there's anything in that pixel, in that frame, then it shows up as kelp, right? So if you look out the window of the plane as Mary did, I credit you, Mary, you can see how there's just no kelp all the way down here to Point Sur. There's not really anything in the water there. Maybe a little bit over here, maybe a little bit out there, but very little kelp left. And the effect of that is that all those sea otters from that area came to Monterey looking for a place to get some food. And we found these rafts of over 200 sea otters it's right in front of the Monterey Aquarium. And they are not that big of numbers nowadays, but I mean, I get my best information from Mary. She said she was swimming out there at Otter Point and saw a dozen sea otters. So that's still more sea otters than we usually see. And we're not really sure, what's going to happen with them. Are they going to find food, or are they going to find somewhere else to go? They've been in the intertidal trying to get mussels out of the intertidal, and they just kind of grab hold of them and then let them tear them. The waves batter them and tear the mussels off the rocks. So a little bit about kelp. You guys all love kelp, I'm assuming. I know, but this actually happened at Tankers Reef, where there was a forest fire on the land right behind our kelp forest that we made in the water. And it just shows the contrast of how we pay so much attention to what happens on land and how little we pay attention to what's in the water and the biodiversity of the life that's in the water, and how, there's people that come and put out the forest fires on land, but when it comes to the water, it's up to us. So we tried really hard to get the legal authority to do this kind of work. We tried several times in 17 and in 19, and then in 2020, we got this rule, this exception to the Fish and Game sport fishing regulations. to allow us to do it in 2021. We've tried some other things in future petitions, and those were all denied. And right now we're in this process of a scientific collecting permit, and it's been going on for over a year. But we hope I'll explain more about what that is in the end. But that's a kind of a different legal authority than having a sport fishing amendment. Then this is a way that's through scientific collecting. So it's not a sport fishing regulation. In other words, you won't have to have a fishing license to work on these other sites, because it would be that you would be in a scientific project, for instance. So this is some of the goals that they recommended to us. The authorities don't have any legal jurisdiction over us. They just ask us to do things because, and that's the most that I can ask of anybody too, is, please do it this way. And we're going to submit data in according to their recommendations. So recommendations is kind of like a code word for requirements in a way. So the requirements are that we have to reduce the urchin densities to 2 urchins per square meter on the treatment area for the duration of the amendment. Well, the amendment goes on for another year. So we are working on that, and we're committed to that, working at Tankers Reef until the project duration. A lot of them have made investments in there, and it's really interesting to see what goes on. We learn a lot from it, and we're in a maintenance phase at this point. So it should be something that we can do as we press on to better places. Here's the Tankers Reef project. I think everybody knows about this on this call. I'm going to go through things fairly quickly here for people who are maybe listening to a recording. Oh, there's the chat. Who's saying anything in the chat? Let's see them. Okay. Everybody can see the slides. Good. The Tankers Reef project area is defined by this red enforcement boundary. And on the site, there's shale reefs. And for reference, there's a shale island site that people are probably more familiar with than other sites around here. And on this site, this mustard color is where historically kelp forests have been over the last 30 years in all of these areas. And in that area, we established a cable grid as underwater treatment area where we can do diver efforts repeatedly over time and to see what the effect is on the kelp forest in that place. The goals: number 1, do it safely, right? That's why we have all these instructors doing. I'm not an instructor, I'm a dive master. I said at the outset, so I don't teach anybody. I rely on people who are trained in doing that to make sure it's safe. So we want trained divers to call the urchins properly without harming other things on the reef, and to reduce the density of the urchins, the purple and red urchins, below 2 per square meter in the treatment area. That's just what we think could be the threshold density. It's really a rule of thumb. And the Department of Fish and Wildlife and Reef Check California will monitor our work to see how well we are meeting the goals. Other project goals are to establish a giant kelp forest at Tankers Reef, provide a giant kelp spore bank for future kelp forest recovery, and to monitor changes in the kelp forest community, and to provide habitat for southern sea otters. So you can definitely get involved in this program. You can learn the specialty class at the PADI class at Aquarius in Monterey or Diver Dans in Santa Clara. Also, there's another one too. I think Pacific Offshore Divers is also in it too. And NAUI, Bamboo Reef in Monterey is teaching the NAUI course. And here are some slides from the program. Prerequisites for the course: open water certification, comfort diving in Monterey, at least 20 dives. You can maintain neutral buoyancy, skilled with beach or boat entry and exit. Ability to use a compass, really helpful. If you have doubts, talk to your instructor about that and combining it perhaps with other courses that could help you in having those skills. Before you go, you'll need to purchase a fishing license. You can buy them online. They're now $58.58, but they're 365-day licenses. So if you were to buy one in June, it would expire in June of 24 instead of expiring at the end of 24 in December. So that's kind of an advantage in that situation. They are valid for longer, perhaps. You buy a hammer, you can buy it on Amazon. It's a chipping hammer, or Home Depot or Harbor Freight. It's cheapest. And you'll also need a small slate, shears or a knife, a surface marker buoy, a whistle, and clips to hold your hammers and things to yourself. Sea urchin anatomy and behavior. You'll learn about this in the class. There's 5 parts to an urchin, and each section has the yellow gonads, and the test is this outside area. And this is the calorie-rich part of the urchin that we all like to eat for uni. And sea otters love to eat the uni too, but only when the urchins are healthy and they have those gonads in them that are full. Effective urchin culling, you'll learn this. Small urchins take 2 or 3 taps to cull completely. The larger urchins take several taps. And we don't chip the rock surface around substrate, around the urchins hiding in shell pockets. Tanker's shell reef is considered very brittle, like a frozen chocolate bar. And cold urchins become food for kelp forest fish and invertebrates. We've all seen it. It's just wonderful to see the fish eating out of those. And it will draw the fish into the urchin barrens and restore the biodiversity that was lost. This is how it looks underwater when you're culling an urchin. Yep. And yeah. How do I go to the next slide here? I'll go that way. So we also will leave urchins under deep ledges alone, and never to use your hammer on an urchin if you can't see the hammer tip. They'll continue to come out later, and another group of cullers can cull them if we miss them the first time. Move these urchins when they're on the edge here. If you hit this urchin right here, you might knock off the whole ledge. This stuff's so brittle. And neutral buoyancy and body position. Our hands should touch the urchins and a rock or encrusting algae and not other marine life. It's hard to do. And we have these rock boring clams that are on the reef, and there's lots of things to avoid besides that. So new for this year, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it now, is that we are now using a Salesforce data portal to enter our data, you get assignments, and to register. So the first step is to register, and your instructor will show you how to register in the class through the section. You go to g2kr.com. There's a section there to get your registration and to get your assignment. So this is the lane assignments, how you get lane assignments on the portal. Go to g2kr.com, go to the assignments tab, and you can pick the assignment that you would like to do. And just select that one and get it for yourself. And you need it to do one for yourself, for you and your buddy. You and your buddy will both use that same lane assignment. If you do 2 dives that day, then take 2 lane assignments. That was a good question that Barbara asked last time. And again, your instructor is going to go over this with you in the class. And then this is how your class will cull urchins on the cable grid. You can see this big, large white mooring ball, 4 yellow buoys, and an orange buoy, and a gray buoy on the site. And your dive will start at the white mooring buoy. And on the orange buoy, you will go down on the orange buoy, and you go out to a lane on this area, and you go east or west, depending on your assignment. So you stop when your buddy is getting low on air, and ascend with a surface marker buoy, or swim to the orange buoy and ascend on the line for safety. We have a boat traffic out there. We want to make sure that everybody is safe, and that's by either shooting SNB and letting boats know you're there, or by navigating your way back to a buoy and ascending next to the buoy. Recording data, you record the time you spend calling urchins, not your total bottom time. Where you call the urchins on the grid, your lane number and east or west, and your start and stop points as measured on tape measure that's there, and the number of urchin called. This is optional for people. You can count purples, you can count purples and reds, you can count all of them combined, or you can count none of them at all. And anything else noteworthy, including marine mammal encounters, invasive species with location, accidental damage to marine life, and trash on the site, and damage to grid lines or buoys. Any other comment about what your dive experience was about? We did have a problem with it only being a limit of 255 characters, and some people like to describe a lot, and they were getting errors. So we removed that error. You can tell a whole long narrative of your experience now. And then you're going to report the data, and you go to g2kr.com and log a dive. If you picked an assignment, it'll prompt you, it'll ask you, are you completing that assignment now? If you didn't get an assignment and you just went out there and did things and freelance, kind of like did without following the assignment, then you can do that too, and just record where you were on the grid, your start and stop position, and how much distance you traveled in those lanes. And that's really the emphasis, right? Is we want to get good data out of this too, from all the people who are doing the work, and so that we can inform marine resource managers what our effort is like in comparison to what the results were. Short item from Tankers Reef. This is kind of an old graphic. We're revising it now in the course. You can go from the condos. We are having meetups again. The next one coming up is July 8th at the condos. And you can come to the meetup, and we're right next to the pool, and then we go out from the shore out to the grid and have a good time out there, removing the urchins in a big area with a lot of people. And this is something that people can come to if they are there's limited parking on the street there. But this is the meetups, and we have them scheduled for every 3 weeks. And this is a good opportunity for people who are just doing discovery. Like if you have a friend, you want to introduce them to urchin calling, and they're not trained, well, they can come out and do one of these, and they can go with you, and you can show them the ropes. And if they're interested, then they can take the training themselves at another time. At Tankers Reef, you can get there by boat as well. Boat access is from the Breakwater Harbor. You can get there, and we want you to go or here. You're going to enter from the north because the divers could be on the south part of it. So and more at the white buoy only. That's our strongest anchor out there. And you can also anchor on the site. You know, try to stay out of the kelp forest if you anchor there. And the wind always picks up at 1 o'clock. Didn't used to do that, but from 1 o'clock to like 5 o'clock, it gets pretty windy out on the water, I would say. So if you want to try to get your visits done early, we seem to always end later than we think it is, and we get into the wind after 1 o'clock. So there is charters on the Beach Hopper too. Wednesdays, except for this coming Wednesday, there wasn't enough people on the boat, and I wasn't able to crew it. So, but normally we have on Wednesdays, we have 2 tank calling dives. They're $50 to go out to Tankers Reef and to call urchins there. And on the first Saturday of the month, we have calling dives in the morning and a red urchin roundup in the evening. The next one's coming up. I encourage you guys to go to it. There are openings for the night dive. I think the morning dive is closed, but there is room on the night charter, and they're a lot of fun. I mean, the urchins come out at night. And so reservations, contact the beachhopper2.com is where you can make your reservations. So current status. Okay. So in blue on this map is where the kelp was in 2021. We had set the grid down, and then we realized that we were partially in the kelp forest, but partially in an urchin barren on this site. In blue is where kelp formed in the first year. We would go out with the boat and circle it and determine that this is where it was in 21. But our effort was all contained within this blue culling limits of the site. So what had happened was we tried to defend this kelp forest, and we kept it alive pretty long. But then we had to go and shift our attention to the grid. So we worked on the grid. By September of the first year, we reduced the urchin density below the threshold that they wanted. And then we went back and tried to defend this kelp on the north, but we just couldn't keep up with it. There was just way too much urchins coming into it. And this kelp out here died off in the winter of 21. And what we had done by keeping that alive is that the spores from that came with the normal swell and formed this new kelp forest that we have down here. So in 2022, the kelp forest had moved to this new location right here. And there's some areas here, like this section over here, where we didn't call any urchins out there. We never visited there. I swam out there and there are no urchins in that area, and the kelp looks pretty good. So it could be that these urchins came from here into the kelp, into our kelp forest this way and to their demise. Could also be that maybe the sea otters are controlling things within that kelp forest, that maybe it's healthy enough that there's only full urchins within this space, and that's what they're eating. So it'd be interesting to see what that is going on. And what we're seeing now is in this year we saw kelp form way out over here in a space where we definitely haven't called any urchins, but lately I've been driving over it and I haven't seen it anymore. So I don't know, maybe it has been eaten at this point. Not sure. We'll have to keep an eye on it. But also look too that there is this drone overflight area, this red box here that I'm going to show you. And we took a drone with a camera on it from the Cal State University of Monterey Bay, and they flew over it. And in April of 2021, we surveyed this huge area, but within this drone overflight area, this is where the kelp forest was in the first year in 2021. And you can see this little white dot right there. I don't know if it comes through on your screen. That's where the white mooring ball is. That's where the boat is anchored all the time. And so you can see the kelp forest formed. This is kind of April, and by September, it had grown in pretty thick. It was about 6 acres of kelp, and we watched it all diminish slowly. But this is the following year in September of 2022, and you can see the same overflight area. There's that little boat on the mooring ball, and now the kelp forest is here. It's on the other side and on the grid where we did all the culling work. And what that looks like from 200 feet is, here's the boat on the mooring ball, and here is the kelp forest out here on the site. And that's the only thing in this whole space. I mean, there's really not kelp anywhere else except in these areas where we have had this kind of impact. Some of these places we have been over just a couple times, but on the treatment grid, we've been over it multiple times. There's multiple passes on the grid. So we also track early colonizers in this space too, as part of our data reporting and our observations. And what we are seeing is that there's an invasive bryozoan called Watercipera subcortata, red rust bryozoan, and it is very prevalent on the site, and we're watching it expand over time. And urchins, you can see here in this little picture, the urchins eat this. And when we call the urchins, we give a benefit to this to not be eaten. And this invasive bryozoan is from Australia and New Zealand, is where it normally resides, but it came here a long time ago. It's been here for 30 years in the harbor. The other thing that we saw was Desmorestia, which is not invasive. It's a native seaweed, and it has this stipe where it gets really long, and then it wraps around our kelp, and then it causes the kelp to not grow very well because it's very acidic. It has a pH of 2.6. And so it's detrimental to kelp, but it's also good for kelp. I mean, for kelp, because the urchins eat it rather than eating the live kelp. So it suppresses the urchins, and it has an even better effect is that because it's so acidic, it causes the urchin's teeth to dissolve. And when they dissolve like that, then they can't eat for like 3 months. So it's helpful and it's harmful at the same time. And it's this whole interaction that we need to study more. It usually recruits in April. It's now near the end of June here, actually. And we're seeing it form again on the reef. It's an annual, it all disappeared last December, but it seems to be found again. And we're trying to, well, this year we'll map it again and see what extent it is going to grow on the reef. Those of you who have cold urchins in Desmarestia know how miserable it is. It's really hard to find anything in Desmarestia. And yeah. So the current status of the grid, if you were to go out today and look, and these where the buoys are. So we have the white buoy, the 4 yellow buoys at the corners are all there. The orange buoy is at the same site where it's been its entire lifetime. And the cable goes to the north, 60 meters. And the gray buoy does not have any line on it. It's just out there in an area with a lot of urchins. And this is for untrained divers, and we'll just keep moving it around wherever we find a high density. We'll just mark it and move the gray buoy to that location. And people can go there, trained or untrained divers, but the intent is to put it in an urchin barren where untrained divers really can't really hurt things because they don't have any training, and we don't feel really confident that they won't, trip on our kelp and pull it out. So there are 5 tape dividers on the site. They are bolted to the bottom. We put the first 5 in. This area of the grid has more kelp on it. The kelp is in the brown color, and the purple is the big expanse of urchins that are out there. And this is how they are coming. They came back over the winter onto the grid on the first half. And our efforts lately have been in these 2 lanes here. On this last weekend, we did a really good job out there. I think feel pretty good about that. We're trying to push against the pressure that they exert. They are exerting pressure from the west. We're trying to exert culling pressure from the east and push them right off the grid. So another pro tip is come up is that when we put the grid down, there are little bolts that are in the field. And each bolt has a little number on it. It's a little 2-inch by 2-inch tag. And that tag has a letter on one side and a number on the other. And if you know the scheme of how they're laid out, and so A1, A, B, C represents the 25 and the 50 and the 75 meter mark along that line. And the 1 through 9 are the ones going from west to east. So if you found a tag, say it's B8, then you would know, oh, well, to the west that I'm in lane H. And if I was going on the east side of that, I would be in lane J. So you can tell right away where you are without having to go all the way to the ends to see the tag. So that's the pro tip for today. But I got another one. There is on the site another set of tapes that go around this way, perpendicular to the lanes on the site. That was what we used so that we could even find the bolts. It's really hard to find them. It's very common when we're laying out the grids again to try to swim 80 feet to the other end here and just be completely off and make the line go to on a diagonal. So what we did was we put down the tapes. They go from this and this way. So these are 10, 20, 30, 40, all the way to the end. And this one is reverse. This one starts here. This is at 10. You don't have to worry about that. But just know that there's more tape measures out there than you might think. And if you're going in a lane, you're going to come across a tape going in the wrong direction, which is helpful to you if you know what it is, why it's there. But if you didn't know what it is, you might be confused and start following the tape in another direction, not going where you think you're going, but going east or west instead. Pretty easy to do. I've done it. We've all done it. So they are perpendicular. Just when you come to those intersections, make sure and look at your compass. And another tip is that there are marine artifacts out there that you can use as a reference as well. You can go find them, take a look at them. They're interesting. There's urchins on them too. There's the Mary Jo Nelson anchor, which is on C17, I believe. And there's a pump that's out here I tried to find. This is the approximate location. And then there's another pump. But I think this pump is actually over here somewhere. We'll have to find these. And we found a whale fall. There's things we find out here. And if you see something out there, make a note of what you see and what you find, and we'll add it to our list of marine artifacts. It's one of the requirements from Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary is that we identify these areas, alert them to it, and try to avoid harming marine artifacts. This is our project performance. So this is our dashboard that we have. When everyone submits the data, then we get this kind of a readout in an interactive format that has some real data in it. It's updated every week into this Tableau format. So far there's been 609,000 urchins called on the reef, and the ratio of purple to red I thought was interesting was 22.24 urchins. Purples to reds. This is our work rate in the last 90 days. So looking back, is 9.82 urchins per minute is the rate of culling. We try to keep track of the different rates for different places. So the on the grid urchin work rate is different than off the grid urchin work rate. But basically the people who count inform the work rate, and the people that don't count, their time is multiplied by the work rate. This is a different number. This is by area. So how many meters traveled to get urchins. This is urchins called over time, separated by years. We can also make it be a different way, but you can see how, like, and this is the first year. The legend is missing. I don't see it. First year, it was very steep at first, a lot of effort. We're working on the grid. And then it's kind of, the slope is kind of flattened out over time as this goes along, because there's less urchins for us to get. We spend more time diving and less time swinging a hammer when the slope is flat. And then we look at the work rate per month. So with 90-day look back, and then we look at the unit of effort over time. What's the average cost per unit effort per dive? And you can also look at how much effort was done on the grid, how much effort was done off the grid, and you can toggle them by urchins called or by time. It's pretty interactive, and that'll be coming out pretty soon. We're working on it. We want to make sure all our data is in order, but that's how the project is performing now, and you will have this tool in the future. We also have this tool for you too. Is the engagement summary, how much urchinators are on the project, right? So there's 189 urchinators. There's 612 volunteer divers. Those are people who have registered but have not taken the course yet, done any work. And we're almost at 1,300 dives on the project. Last year, we had a lot more by this time of year. It's just we had a lot of weather. I think in the beginning of this year, it kept a lot of divers off the project, and we're doing the maintenance phase. So we haven't really put everybody on full alert and try to draw everybody back in the program yet until we get our future expansion. So, but everything's cool. We're maintaining it. So we have enough effort to do what needs to be done right now. So this is how the number of urchinators per year has increased steadily. It's an upward line. And this is how people are trained on the project, whether they are scientific divers or open water, and this is the urchinators, and this is the people who have registered, where they're coming from. This is the urchins at Tankers Reef. This is the data from Reef Check, California. And on the restoration site, this shows the restoration site and the control site. So they surveyed before we got there. And on the restoration site, there were a lot of urchins. And then as we kept going. In October, there was less. And by the time they were in June and September, we had reduced those numbers down way below the threshold, and the kelp came back, right? So here's the survey before. Here's the kelp actually went down a little bit. I think we had a lot of heat. And then here it is coming back in that following year on the grid. And the control, I haven't been there. I heard that Les was there and counting things. He found a lot of virgins. And I heard there was one kelp plant, and I think that's the one kelp plant on the control right there. I never been to the control. I hear it's horrible. So I also want to point out, in the first year of the project, I thought was really interesting that, the spring, Kevin asked, what about the spring numbers? I don't have them yet. They're probably in Maxwell's, unless I heard Maxwell was drying them. But I haven't seen them in the data form yet. As soon as we get them, we'll share. The normal temperature in Monterey, we have temperature loggers on the grid that measure the temperature every 15 minutes. And this is, you can see how our normal temperature range is, the temperature bobs back and forth. But then we had a marine heat wave, and you can see that the temperature got to about 62 degrees. I mean, well, here's centigrade, but it got really warm for about 3 months. And when it gets warm, it gets green. And when it gets green, then it turns brown. And that's what we saw. This is taken out of an airplane. It's not Mary. It's Keener, Mary Keener. Took a picture. You can see he's got a clip in a reflection here, I think. But you can see the red tide in streaks as it comes out from there. And we've actually canceled dives because it was just too dark. So what we also saw was the result of that, this lack of sunlight, was that the kelp was in very poor condition after that point. It formed just like a small bush without a lot of stipes, sometimes not any fronds at all. And we tried to defend them, and it's kind of undetermined, whether they survived or not when they were in that sort of shape. So the other thing I thought was kind of interesting, if you look at this, is that in a single day, the temperature varies dramatically. We kind of think like the temperature is kind of constant all day, but it really varies quite a bit. And like this last weekend, we were out there and we found cold patches. Like it was like 60 degrees on top and 53 at the bottom. But as you swam around, you found there was cold patches that just like you were swimming through them, you could feel it on your lips and they were done. So there is a lot of variation in it. But you can also see that in this time of the year, this is about December through February, the temperature doesn't vary. It stays almost the same temperature all day. Like there's more, like the water's more stagnant or something, but you would think there'd be storms. It's kind of weird. I saw the same thing at Lovers too, but it doesn't have the same day-to-day variation as it does in the other months. So South Monterey Bay, we have 92% kelp loss in Monterey. Historically, there was 487 acres of kelp in South Monterey Bay. And then zooming in a little bit, this is last year in September of 22, 38.5 acres of kelp in South Monterey Bay is all that remains. And, September was pretty good. I think it's probably gotten worse since then. But 11 acres of that is our little kelp patch here at Tankers Reef that, it wouldn't have been if we hadn't have made it into our garden, right? So it would have been 94% kelp loss if it wasn't for that. So this is future expansion. What we're thinking of doing is we are applying for a scientific collecting permit, and we've applied for that. It's been in there for 3 weeks now. We hope to get a meeting with them again and get this through their pre-application process so we can get this completed. And our proposal is to do work at Brigadier Gardens, which is also known as the Breakwater, right next to St. Carlos Beach. There's a control at Hopkins, and then Otter Cove would be another area. There's a remnant kelp forest there. Mary has helped us by going around with her stand-up paddleboard and helping us to map that. We've had volunteer divers out there surveying it, video surveys, and determining where things are. We'll show more about that. Stillwater Cove is another site that we've been to and doing surveys, and it's really protected. It's kind of an easier one. And this Stillwater Cove, the reef check site is out here. We won't call any urchins. And then at Stewart's Cove, which we were just talking about at the beginning, have a little sidebar conversation with Barbara and Les had been out here and found that this place is it's approaching urchin barren state. There are a lot of urchins in this kelp forest that need to be removed. Looking at it a little closer, here's Brigadier Gardens. The area in green is our proposed culling area. The red lines are the reef check transects that are already there. We have 16 years of baseline data, and that's essential for getting permission, is that they want to know, like, what's the history of this place, so that they can tell what the differences are going to be. And we've mapped it a little bit. We found this is where the urchins are. There's some on the other side of the wall as well. And out here in these areas, there's a little bit of kelp left, but there's urchins in all of that kelp at all. But the nice thing about this area is that there's rocks with sand all around them. And we know sand prohibits movements pretty well. So that's a very defensible space. This is Otter Cove. This is our previous site out here at Lovers, just for reference. We have a lot of data out here. These are the reef check transects in here. And this is the little kelp that remains, as expressed by Mary, where this is. And from what I hear, Mary can say, there's less kelp now than it's always less kelp out there. And there's urchins in the kelp forest. So, and this little orange line is our video reconnaissance. We have a YouTube channel. All our video reconnaissance is available. You can go there if you have the time, and you can stay awake watching people dive. You can go and look at the urchin barrens there. This is Stillwater Cove, Carmel. So shore access is next to this pier, and it's a little bit of a ways to come out from the shore to go to, there's 2 kelp forests that are on this site that are alive. One of them has a lot of sand in it and no urchins, and one has a lot of rock and has a lot of urchins in it. And so it's very defensible space. There's sand around it. So it leads itself to easy access, and this is our control site. We don't have to worry about that, but Reef Check does survey that, so that's our reference site for that one. And then here is the Stewart's Cove and our proposed culling area out here. This is a long way to swim from that shore access to this rock. I mean, we can measure it, but it's a long way to go. So a lot of this will probably be done by boat. So this site introduces some additional logistical challenges for us to be able to go out and get this site, but it'll probably be done 4th of those 4. And some of the parts of doing this is that Giant Kelp Restoration Project will do the effort, all of you, and the Reef Check and their crew will do the science behind it and all the counting and reporting on it. So with that partnership, we have this other permit application. We're trying to get a restoration management permit, which is a proper way to do this kind of effort. And that should come once the Fish and Wildlife just figures out what one is. They've done them on land, but they haven't done one in the ocean yet. So they're kind of thinking about how they can do that. And in that effort, we want to cull urchins and bait and trap urchins, have commercial restoration by harvest of purple urchins that we would feed into urchin ranching. Manage that acid weed. If I think it's still going to be a problem, we have to figure out what to do about that. Are we going to pull it? Or are we going to pull it along a front, or what can be done? Can we pull it and feed it to urchins and dissolve their teeth? I don't know. Have to figure that out. Removing invasive species. Oh, sorry. That are on the site, like the water cypera, or if we find Sargassum horneri, which would be devastating, and how we're going to remove those. Kelp planting and transplanting are certainly options we want to do. Perhaps put in some kelp that is more heat tolerant, maybe from other sites like in Baja and further south, as we prepare for a warmer climate. Kelp canopy management. Oh, we're going to change this by trimming or pruning the kelp canopy. It's tradition. I mean, if you look at the history of kelp, there was a predator there, the silver sea cow, that would eat just kelp, but it's no longer around. So kelp's normal life cycle is that there was this predator there that was pruning the tops of the kelp. Kelp's reaction to having the canopy cut is to send up another stipe. So it actually, the pruning stimulates the growth and makes it more resilient. And to prohibit the fishing in our restoration areas, we have a lot of fishermen that want to go to our kelp forests, and we find all their lost gear on our site, but it's really not helpful, and we shouldn't have fishermen with motors running around in spaces where we're trying to dive. It's just not helpful. I could go on, but fish are a functioning part of the ecosystem, and they're helpful to us. There's no reason that in an experiment you should be removing them. So that's it. So I don't see any questions in the chat, but if anybody would like to ask a question, why don't you just come off mute and ask away. I'll stop sharing.
Hey, Keith, this is Brian. With regard to the temperature, I was noticing big differences between the temperature near the surface and the temperature toward the bottom. So where is the temperature important for the kelp? What depth?
Yeah, that's a good question, because basically the temperature is affecting the algae, the greenness of the water, right? So as it sits there for a while and stagnates, then it turns really green, and that's harmful for the kelp. But it seems that when the kelp reaches the surface and forms a canopy, that it gets the sunlight then. So I think this kind of two answers to that is that if we get a lot of warmth and the heat, and that light makes it so that it doesn't reach the bottom, then it's hard for new kelps to start and to get big. And what we're seeing actually is that the kelp kind of formed on the surface because of the heat, and then it kind of coagulated together and formed snots and settled down, and then the bottom was a blackout. So it was kind of reverse of how you normally see our kelp forest, where it was clear on top and blackout at the bottom. And that made the kelp be so that the kelp at the bottom was just kind of stunted. It didn't get going very well. And then you have kelps that made it to the surface. So our temperature monitors for the site are on the bottom, and that's where those readings are taken. But I don't really know, kelp likes cold, nutrient-rich water. So if it's cold, it's good for kelp. And if it's cold at depth, it's good for kelp too. That's because that gets the most nutrients for it, and that's how it grows the best. So yeah. So if it's little kelp, it's more important on the bottom, I guess. Hope that was an answer.
Sorry. Well, sorry, I had another question, completely different, but maybe a comment. You thought about moving the gray buoy closer to the shore, because that's for untrained divers. Having it so far away from the shore is less attractive. And
yeah, I think you're right. There's been very few people that actually went to the gray buoy for the 2 years. Only 22 people went there to the gray buoy and did work. But yeah, we set it out there so that we could do it on a night dive and have an anchor for the beach hopper then. But it is a good idea. We should go out and scout them and find a bunch of urchins and just out west somewhere closer to shore and drop that gray buoy on it, and then we'll just send people to go over there and call them. Thanks. Yes.
Yeah, more of a comment than a question. I've been interested in learning to kayak dive because I feel like that might make tankers a lot more accessible to me. And I've talked with Tyler, who's now at Monterey-based Scuba, about teaching the class, and he's working on that. So if anyone watching this or any of your friends want to learn to kayak dive for that reason, reach out to me or to Tyler.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, I've seen Tyler out there with like 4 kayaks, and they're all tied end to end, and they just go out there and they hook onto any buoy. A kayak doesn't pull very hard. You can start on any corner you like with that, and it's it's a skill, definitely getting on and off a kayak, that I think is it's good to take a lesson on that. I've been out there with the kayak myself, and I nearly sunk it by not having letting it flood into the holes in the middle. So yeah.
Where did you say Tyler is teaching now?
He's at Monterey Bay Scuba.
Okay, Monterey, thank you.
Yeah. We should add his new location. The instructors have moved around a little bit with Bamboo Reefs. Yeah.
Related to that, if anybody is interested in having a kayak, I have an ocean kayak. I just can't physically do it anymore. So I've got an unused kayak with paddles that I can offer to somebody.
Does
Wow.
it have a tank well?
Sorry?
Is it the kind with the tank well in the back?
Yeah, it's a tank, has a tank well in the back, yeah. But it's definitely a skill to do it. And when I was younger, I could do it. I just can't do it anymore.
There you
So
go.
it's
Can you put your email into the chat there, Brian, so that people
I
can
think
can
I
reach
might
you?
know some people that would be interested in that. They're not necessarily kelp restoration divers yet, but I'm working on them.
Yeah, make sure you give it to someone who's a kelp restoration.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'd
right?
like to
Priority.
get somebody who's
Definitely.
working the project.
Yeah. Cool.
For the scientific permits, what can people do, if anything, to help petition, lobby, call?
Yeah, that's the political effort is real, and I went to the Fish and Game Commission, and there's actually a meeting coming up. The Marine Resources Committee meeting is coming up, and I'll invite people to that. But mostly they're trying to determine how they're going to behave in terms of the marine protected areas. Are they going to allow people to do large restoration in the marine protected areas? And so our effort is trying to make these areas in the marine protected areas very small, take up a very small percentage of these marine protected areas by design. And really we want to do the entire MPA. We don't want to do just a little bit, we want to do it all. So I think the steps to coming up would be to try, and the biggest obstacle I think is Fish and Game Commission, and trying to convince them that these marine protected areas, in order to protect them, that we need to call the urchins that are within them. So as far as what you can do, I mean, right now we're kind of in a wait and see mode. We're kind of waiting for them to arrange a meeting with us, and once we get that, then it'll be all hands on deck. We'll have to do all these recons and kick things off, and Reef Check will have to survey first, and all this sort of thing. So it's a little ways away, and it's been a little ways away for a year. I hate to say it, but we're all kind of falling victim to that. So there will come a time when I will ask you to write a petition, and Steve Passetti has actually written that petition to the MRC meeting. It's on our Facebook page. You can write a form letter and tell them about their certain initiatives they are proposing for the MPA review process that will give better access to us, and for long-term funding for our allies like Reef Check that come out and do all the monitoring. Yeah. Thanks. Anybody else?
And the keeping it small, is that why places like Coral Street and some of the just vast urchin barrens aren't in scope?
Yeah, I mean, I when I was first asking for it, I was like, I want that entire SMCA, right? And that's really the goal. But in all of these things, you have to prove yourself each time. But what they like to do is, oh, okay, here, go ahead and prove yourself. Here's a 3-year project. Now go away for 3 years, right? And so we went at Tankers for 2 years, and then we moved on at Lovers for 2 years. Then we went to Tankers. We're done 2 years there. Now we're working on a 3rd year there. And so hopefully we can get out of it before the time limit is up. I think it was an interesting question. Somebody asked me today, Josh Russo from the North Coast, and he says, are you going to re-up on the amendment and try to go for longer at Tankers? And I would think that, we're going to have other efforts going on, but I think Tankers is in this maintenance phase, and we're learning so much out there about so many different things, and we have all this baseline data. It'd be a shame to really to stop now. I mean, our effort will definitely be less than we're doing now, but I think it's worthwhile, and that what we learn at Tankers, I think, might just inform our other efforts, how things work, and we may learn enough there to make our efforts more efficient in other places. We've already learned so much, what works best, and how diver experience matters, and everything else, and keeping it safe, and how the program's working, right, and how it's being successful.
And it's certainly a really, really amazingly pretty reef with the diversity of life there.
It is. Like, I never dove there. I don't know about anybody else, but I never really dove there much before this happened. And I don't really know what it was like before the urchins came and took it all down, but I'm really going to appreciate what it's like after they're gone. So maybe that's what it was like. And there's a lot of fish there. Don't tell the fishermen, but yeah, it's coming up. It's coming up quite well.
So I remember a year or two ago, there was some legislation in the state house to allow culling or allow preservation in MPAs. Whatever happened with that? Did it fizzle? Did it pass?
There is something going on at the state. It's not that, though. They have an AB 1407 is the laws in the California legislature passed through appropriations, which is the big one. And it's basically funding efforts and making a framework to do kelp restoration in the state legislature. I have a framework to establish guidelines to have so many acres, like 5,000 acres restored but it's a long timeline, 2050. And but was written by the Nature Conservancy and the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and it's got legs. We'll see how that goes. It could be the law at the end of the year. And then there's also other things going on with Ocean Protection Council. They formed a kelp working group for giant kelp that I am trying to get onto that committee. And there's funding from Sea Grant for there's $5 million available, and $2 million can go to any one project. And we are in a good position to get that money because we're doing restoration and research in a proven method. We will definitely throw our hat in the ring for that funding from Sea Grant. I'd also say that Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary is receiving a lot of funding from the federal government, from NOAA. They received 2.6 million, and then 4.9, and now 9 million. And Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, which is where we're at, they've already funded $2 million towards research, and they are telling me they're going to fund restoration. It's slowly coming around. There will be funding coming eventually, and we want to make it easier for everybody to participate in this. What are the barriers to participation for people? Accommodations, mileage, air fills, gear, charters, whatever it takes. Let's put all that into our grant proposal and see what we can do to get those things that are paid for, in the effort.
Very cool. Thanks.
And Ollie Boutros is with us, and we're going to go in another level to the international community and try to establish a citizen science kelp restoration group with the Kelp Forest Alliance in Hobart, Tasmania. And we have a separate committee, and Ollie is on it with myself and Annie from Reef Check. And we're going to see if we can take what we've learned from all of you and this method in our Salesforce software and port it to other places that also have problems with their kelp. There's 10 million acres of kelp in the world, and 1.5 to 5 million, did I say acres? Hectares. 10 million hectares. And there's 1.5 to 5 million hectares degraded in the world. So this is a worldwide problem. And I think that, volunteerism and ocean stewardship are best promoted through this kind of activity. And that will move the needle around the world if we all start getting engaged in this kind of grassroots community effort to do this kind of work. Any others? We're at 6:03. Oh my gosh, we're over time.
Just a quickie, Keith.
Yes.
That dashboard you showed, do we have access to that or not?
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna let me give it to you here. Let me I have it open. Okay. This is it right here. This is it's public, but it's an unlisted link. I'll put it right there in the chat. And it's a work in progress, but you can see all of these things in this thing. And you can look at the date. You can move these sliders around, right? Play around with it. See if you can break it, right? Test it out. Like you can look at, oh, only in this date range and what happened on the grid and off the grid. You can say, oh, I'm going to look at only Brian's. So it's initials, right? Here's Barbara Davis. Let's look at Barbara Davis. And
Oops, I think I lost you guys.
oh,
there.
so here's Barbara's data, right? Let's look at.
Are you sharing your screen or something? 'Cause
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't-
not seeing it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me share my screen. Here. Sorry. You see it now?
Yep.
Okay, so it has these sliders and you can move them around over time. And you can pick on somebody else here. Let's pick on. There's a lot of M's. Mary Willie. There you are. So this is only, well, I take Barbara out of it. This is only, oh, I did take Barbara out of it. Yeah, Barbara Davis is not it. So this is only Mary's data. And I can't get it to go back. There we go. So this is her work rate. This is her unit of effort. This is urchins called over time. You can look at your own data where you've been calling. You've been calling on and off the grid. You can look at urchins called, time spent calling, right? Different metric of it. And you can play around with all these toggles. Go there, check it out. Tell me where, try to break it, right? Like you can look at on the grid or off the grid. You can individual divers. Maybe you want to look at, you can look at what's the effort like in any particular place on the grid. You want to look at, you're curious about the A lanes or something, you can see, you can narrow it down like that. And also engagement, like I was saying before. And there's a new part here about survey results. So we have Reef check data in this set too. Oh, I'm only looking at treatment area. Oh, that's weird. I don't know why it doesn't have the data. Maybe something's goofy in this. I had it. It was on there. There it is. I don't know what I did. So there's the reef check, total urchin density and kelp going up. And for that under control, and you can toggle all these things too, the treatment area or the control area and what lane it is, what transect type. So all the data is here and you can relate them together. Our next step is to like put them on the same graph even, you know. And so there's different audiences for this. One's the performance from the people that are involved in it. And it's also like for the scientists that want to go and dive deeper into this data, they can do it through this portal as well. And students call me up and they say, hey, I want to do a study on this, and we turn them on the data and they can do the research and tell us what they found. So it's a lot of fun. So enjoy that. Try to break it. Please don't share the link with other people because, well, on my screen, I just shared it, but it's going to change over time. So you're aware. Cool. Any other questions?
No, just thank you very much for all the information. And I also want to thank Mary and Steve for the photos. They're fantastic. I love those.
Gotta bring a camera and a hammer more often.
Yeah, a camera with an SD card.
Randall's camera mounted on a hammer.
Yeah, we have a YouTube site too. I encourage everyone to go look at it. And there is on our YouTube site the hammer cam. It's on there. So check it out. It's a lot of fun. And we'll keep putting stuff up there as well for, you can look at all the recons and perimeter searches and life on the reef too. It's a lot
What
of fun.
about that, there was the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Restoration and Management Plan? I think they were looking for volunteers.
Yes, that's right. That's the kelp
You-
restoration management plan. I nominated myself for it.
Very good.
It's already closed out. They confirmed that they did get my application. They're gonna be secretive about it. But they're supposed to decide all of that and who's gonna be on it. There's a bull kelp group and a giant kelp group. And I'm applying for a giant kelp group. And we'll see if we can lead the way and
Thanks.
no other things. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I sure appreciate it. And I could, I'm just finding a pathway for people to do this kind of work. It's really up to everybody else to do all this work. And I'm just really, really couldn't be prouder of everybody here and the work that's been done. I'm not going before the Fish and Game Commission with my tail between my legs and saying, oh, we tried, we're going there and saying, hey, it worked. We have evidence. You have evidence, right? Because they're the ones who are counting it. So it's I complain about Fish and Game all the time, but I'm having the time of my life. I'm just loving it, right? I'm inspired by so many people. It's the friendship, the camaraderie. We're building a community, and I just can't say enough good things about this and everybody that's involved in it. So I hope you all are as inspired as I am. So thank you, everyone, and have a good evening, and we'll catch you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.